The crimson scales of Kale Vorthak gleamed like fresh blood under the pale light of Kepler 442b's twin suns. His massive form cast a shadow across the burning remains of what had once been New Busan's outer settlements. At 12 feet tall, with wings that could span a small building, Kale was everything the galaxy feared about the Vorthak Empire. His yellow eyes burned with the fire of conquest as he surveyed the destruction below. For 3 weeks, these stubborn humans had resisted his forces. 3 weeks longer than any other species in recent memory. Most worlds surrendered within days. When they heard the name, Kyle Vorthak was coming for them. But these humans of New Busan were different. They fought with a desperate courage that both annoyed and intrigued him. The main colony still stood in the distance, its energy shields flickering but holding strong. Governor Lee Dae-ho had proven to be a more capable opponent than Kale had expected. The human had used the planet's crystal formations and underground tunnels to his advantage, making every advance costly for the Vorthak forces. Kale flexed his powerful wings and prepared for another assault. His biomechanical flight systems hummed with energy as they integrated with his natural abilities. The technology was a mark of his status in the Empire. Only the highest-ranking warriors earned such enhancements. "Commander," came a voice through his communication device. It was his second-in-command, a smaller Vorthak named Drock. "Our ground forces report heavy resistance at the eastern approach. The humans have some kind of new weapon system," Kyle snarled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Then we will crush them from above. Prepare for my final assault on their central stronghold." The massive dragon launched himself into the air with a sound like thunder. His enhanced systems analyzed wind patterns and energy signatures as he climbed higher. Below, the human colony looked like a small cluster of lights against the planet's rocky surface. Kale had conquered over 50 worlds for the Vorthak Empire. He had faced species with technology far advanced beyond these humans. He had defeated warriors twice his size and armies 10 times larger than the forces defending New Busan. Yet something about this battle felt different. The humans fought not just for territory or resources, but for something else. Something his. Warrior culture had never taught him to understand. They protected their weak instead of abandoning them. They shared their food and medicine even when supplies ran low. It was behavior that made no sense to a Vorthak mind. As he dove toward the colony's center, Kyle noticed the humans had been busy during the night. New structures dotted the landscape, and strange metal towers had been erected around the main settlement. His enhanced vision detected energy readings from these towers, but his systems could not identify their purpose. Probably some desperate, defensive measure, he thought to himself. Humans always try to build their way out of problems instead of fighting properly. Kale angled his dive toward the largest building in the colony. Intelligence reports suggested it housed the human command center. If he could destroy Governor Lee Dae-ho and his staff in one strike, the resistance would crumble within hours. The wind rushed past his scales as he picked up speed. His biomechanical systems charged his breath weapon, preparing to unleash a blast of superheated plasma that could melt through any human armor or shielding. This would be the final blow that ended 3 weeks of annoying resistance. But as he passed between 2 of the strange metal towers, something went wrong. A massive pulse of electromagnetic energy erupted from the towers and spread outward like an invisible net. Kale felt his biomechanical systems suddenly go dead. The integration between his natural abilities and his technological enhancements vanished in an instant. His flight became unstable as half of his enhanced control systems failed. "Impossible!" he roared, but his voice was lost in the wind as he began to fall. The humans had built an electromagnetic pulse trap. Somehow they had learned about Vorthak, biomechanical technology, and found a way to disrupt it. Kale's natural wings could still function, but without his enhancement systems, he could not maintain controlled flight at this speed and altitude. He crashed into the ground with tremendous force, sending up a cloud of dust and crystal fragments. The impact created a crater 20 feet wide and drove him deep into the planet's crystal formations. Pain shot through his body as tons of unstable crystal debris collapsed on top of him. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Kale Vorthak found himself trapped and helpless. The crystalline cavern around him sparkled with an eerie beauty. The planet's unique mineral formations had been shaped by millions of years of geological activity. Under different circumstances, Kale might have admired the natural artwork created by time and pressure, but now these same formations had become his prison. His communication systems were completely dead. The electromagnetic pulse had fried every piece of technology on his body. Even if his forces came looking for him, the crystal formations would block any scanning attempts. The minerals in these caves interfered with most known detection methods. Kale tried to move, but several large crystal formations pinned his legs and one wing. Each attempt to break free only caused more debris to shift and fall. The cavern was unstable, and any violent movement might cause a complete collapse that would bury him forever. Hours passed in the strange underground silence. Above, he could hear the distant sounds of battle as his forces continued their assault on the colony. But without their commander, their attacks lacked coordination. The humans had not only trapped him, but had also disrupted his army's ability to function effectively. Thirst began to gnaw at him. Hunger would follow soon after. These were sensations that Kale had not experienced in decades. As a high-ranking Vorthak warrior, he always had access to the best food and water. The idea of dying slowly from thirst in an underground cave was both terrifying and humiliating. The mighty Kale Vorthak, terror of the galaxy, reduced to a trapped animal waiting for death. If his enemies could see him now, they would celebrate. If his own people could see him, they would consider him weak and worthless. As darkness settled over the planet above, Kale closed his yellow eyes and tried to conserve his strength. Perhaps his forces would find a way to locate him. Perhaps the cave would remain stable long enough for rescue. Perhaps he would find his own way out. But for the first time in his long life, Kale Vorthak was not certain he would survive. The dragon had fallen, and he was truly alone. 3 days had passed since Kale's capture in the crystal caves. His throat burned with thirst, and his massive body ached from being trapped in the same position. The proud warrior who had never known defeat now understood what helplessness truly meant. The sounds of battle above had grown quieter. Sometimes he heard the roar of ships passing overhead, but he could not tell if they belonged to his forces or the humans. His communication systems remained dead, and the thick crystal formations blocked all outside signals. Kyle had tried everything he could think of to escape. He had tested every crystal formation within reach, looking for weak points. He had attempted to shift his weight in different ways to create leverage. Nothing worked. The cave system was like a perfectly designed trap, holding him secure without killing him. On the 3rd day, he heard something different. Footsteps. They were light and careful, moving through the crystal passages with the hesitation of someone who was lost. Kale's enhanced hearing told him it was a single person, probably small in build. His first thought was that one of his warriors had finally found him. His second thought was that a human soldier had come to finish him off. Either way, he would face his visitor with the dignity of a Vorthak warrior. The footsteps grew closer, echoing off the crystal walls. A small light appeared in the darkness, moving back and forth as if searching for something. Then the light stopped, and Kale heard a sharp intake of breath. "Oh no," said a young voice in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "You are hurt very badly." The light moved closer, and Kyle found himself looking at a human boy. He appeared to be barely an adult, with dark hair and worried eyes behind thick glasses. He wore the simple clothes of a civilian, not the armor of a soldier. In his hands, he carried a basic portable scanner and a small water container. "You are Kale Vorthak," the boy said, his voice shaking slightly. "Everyone knows your face. You are the one they call the Crimson Death." Kale expected the boy to run or call for help. Instead, the young human stepped closer and began examining the crystal formations that trapped him. "My name is Park Min-ho," the boy said, still studying the debris. "I am a geology student. I was in these caves studying crystal formations when the battle started above. I have been lost down here for 3 days." "Why do you not flee, human?" Kyle asked, his voice rough from thirst. "Do you not know what I have done to your people?" Min-ho looked at him with those serious eyes. "Yes, I know. But you are trapped and hurt. Running away will not help either of us get out of here." This was not the response Kale had expected. In Vorthak culture, enemies were enemies until one was dead. There was no middle ground, no mercy for the defeated. Yet this boy spoke as if Kale's identity as a conqueror was less important than his current situation. "You should leave me to die," Kale said. "It would be wise." "Maybe," Min-ho replied, "but it would not be right." The boy unscrewed the cap of his water container and held it toward Kale's mouth. "You need water. I can see you are very thirsty." Kale stared at the container in amazement. This human boy, who could not weigh more than one of his arms, was offering to share his water with the enemy who had destroyed his world. It made no sense according to everything Kale understood about survival and warfare. "Why?" he asked. Min-ho shrugged, a very human gesture. "Because you are thirsty and I have water. It is not complicated." Against his better judgment, Kale accepted the water. The cool liquid felt wonderful against his parched throat. He had not realized how desperate his need had become until that moment. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. Vorthak warriors did not thank their enemies. Min-ho nodded and began walking around the trapped dragon, studying the crystal formations from different angles. He pulled out his scanner and took readings of the mineral structures. "These crystals are very unstable," he said. "If we try to break them with force, the whole cave might collapse. But maybe we can find a way to shift them carefully." "We?" Kyle asked. "Well, yes," Min-ho said, looking puzzled. "I cannot get out of these caves alone. The passages are too confusing, and some areas need someone strong to move rocks. You cannot get out because you are trapped. So we help each other." The logic was simple and practical, but it challenged everything Kale believed about the nature of enemies and allies. This boy was suggesting they work together despite being on opposite sides of a war. "Your people and mine are enemies," Kale pointed out. "Right now our biggest enemy is this cave," Min-ho replied. "The war is up there. Down here we just need to survive." Over the next several hours, Min-ho worked steadily to understand the crystal formation that held Kale prisoner. He explained his work as he went, describing how the crystals had formed over millions of years and how they responded to pressure and temperature changes. "You know much about rocks," Kyle observed. "My family has been studying geology for generations," Min-ho said. "My grandfather taught me that understanding the earth helps you understand life. Everything builds on what came before, layer by layer." "And what does this teach you about life?" Min-ho paused in his scanning. "That even the hardest stone can be shaped by patience and the right kind of pressure. That destruction is fast, but creation takes time." These words meant something to Min-ho that Kale could not fully understand. Vorthak culture valued destruction as a tool of conquest. Creation was something for the defeated to worry about after the strong had taken what they wanted. As night fell in the caves above, Min-ho shared more of his water and some of his food with Kale. The portions were small, barely enough for one person, but the boy divided everything equally between them. "Your sister and friend," Kale said, remembering the stories Min-ho had told to pass time. "Do they know you are missing?" "Probably," Min-ho said sadly. "Unji works at the medical center. She will be very busy helping hurt people. Sora is an engineer. She might be helping to repair damage from the battle. They will look for me when they can. They will think you are dead. Maybe. But hoping is better than giving up. Kale considered this. In Vorthak culture, hope was considered a weakness. Warriors were taught to accept reality and adapt to it, not to wish for better circumstances. Yet this boy's hope had already led him to share his resources with an enemy and work toward an escape that might benefit both of them. Perhaps there was something about hope that Kale had never understood. As they settled in for another night in the Crystal Caves, Kale found himself looking forward to continuing their conversation in the morning. For the first time in his 3 centuries of life, he was curious about ideas that had nothing to do with conquest or warfare. The dragon was beginning to learn that there might be other kinds of strength in the universe. The 4th day in the caves brought new challenges. Minho's scanner had detected something troubling during the night. The planet's core was showing signs of instability, probably caused by the massive orbital bombardment from Kale's fleet during the first days of battle. The seismic readings are getting worse, Minho explained, showing Kale the data on his small device. We have maybe 1 day before major earthquakes start. After that, these caves will not be safe. Kale studied the readings with interest. His military training included basic planetary science, enough to understand what the numbers meant. Your people's resistance has cost my empire more firepower than usual. The bombardment may have damaged deep rock formations. Can you contact your ships? Tell them to stop the bombing? Kale shook his head. My communication systems are still dead. Even if they worked, my fleet believes I am dead. They follow standard procedure now. Minho looked worried, but he did not panic. Instead, he began working with even more focus on the crystal formations that trapped Kyle. His careful measurements and gentle tests continued, but now with greater urgency. Tell me about your culture, Minho said as he worked. I want to understand why you fight the way you do. This was an unusual request. Most species that faced the Vorthak learned about them through warfare, not conversation. But the long hours in the cave had created a strange situation where normal rules seemed less important. We believe that strength determines worth, Kale explained. The strong have the right to rule the weak. The weak exist to serve the strong. This is the natural order of the universe. But who decides what makes someone strong? Minho asked, carefully adjusting a crystal support beam. Combat. Victory in battle. The ability to take what you want and keep it. Minho nodded thoughtfully. So if I defeat you at something, I become stronger than you? Kyle almost laughed. You could not. Defeat me at anything, small human. I found water when you could not. I understood these crystals when you could not. I am helping you escape when you could not escape alone. Does that not make me stronger in those things? The question caught Kale off guard. By human logic, Minho was right. The boy had succeeded where the mighty Vorthak warrior had failed. But this kind of success did not count as strength in Vorthak culture. Those are not important forms of strength, Kyle said, but his voice sounded less certain than usual. Why not? Right now, they are the only forms of strength that matter. Your ability to destroy cities cannot help you here. Your weapons cannot cut these crystals safely. Your rank in the Empire cannot find water in a cave. Minho continued his work, but kept talking. My sister Yunji is very strong. She can save lives that others would give up on. My friend Sora is strong too. She can build things that help thousands of people. Are they not strong because they do not fight in battles? They heal and build instead of conquering, Kyle said. In my culture, that is weakness. And yet your culture needs people to build ships and heal wounded warriors, does it not? Again, Kale found himself without a good answer. The Vorthak Empire did rely on builders and healers, but they were considered lower classes, less important than the warrior elite. Yet without them, the Empire could not function. You think too much about these things, Kale said finally. Minho smiled, the first real smile Kale had seen from him. My grandfather used to say that too. He said thinking was my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. What did he mean? Thinking helps me solve problems and understand the world. But sometimes it makes me question things that other people accept without thought, like whether enemies always have to be enemies. The boy had found a way to loosen one of the smaller crystal formations. Working very slowly and carefully, he managed to shift it enough to give Kale slightly more room to move. It was a small victory, but it proved that escape might be possible. As they worked together, Kale found himself telling Minho about his own past. He spoke of his birth name, Ralthek, which he had abandoned when he gained his first command. He described the brutal training that all young Vorthak endured, where the weak were eliminated and only the strongest survived to become warriors. I had a clutch brother, Kale said, surprising himself by sharing this memory. He was smaller than me, but very clever. He could solve problems that confused larger warriors, but intelligence was not valued enough to save him. When he failed a combat trial, he was sent to the labor corps. Do you miss him? Miss him? The concept was strange to Kale. Warriors do not miss the weak. But you remembered him. You told me about him. Why, if he was not important? Kyle considered this. Why had he thought of Ralvek after so many years? Why did he still wonder sometimes what his clutch brother might have achieved if given different opportunities? Perhaps, he said slowly, because he understood things that I did not, like how to make the food dispensers work better, or how to predict weather patterns. Small things but useful things, like finding water in caves or understanding crystal formations. Yes, like... Kale stopped, realizing what Minho was suggesting. His clutch brother's skills were similar to the skills that were currently keeping them both alive. The comparison was uncomfortable. It suggested that his clutch brother had possessed real strength, just not the kind that Vorthak culture recognized. It suggested that Minho possessed real strength too. As the day wore on, tremors began to shake the cave system. Small at first, then growing stronger. Dust fell from the ceiling and some of the crystal formations began to crack under the stress. We need to move faster, Minho said, checking his scanner again. The earthquakes are starting early. Working. Together, they managed to free Kale's legs from the crystal debris. But his wing was still trapped under a large formation that would require extreme care to remove safely. One wrong move could bring down the entire section of cave above them. I need to tell you something, Minho said as they paused to rest. Even if we free you completely, I do not know the way out. I have been lost down here for days. The passages all look the same to me. And I cannot fly with damaged wings, Kale admitted. My biomechanical systems are still dead. They sat in the dim light of Minho's small lamp, two beings from different worlds, facing a problem that neither could solve alone. The irony was not lost on Kale. The greatest warrior of the Vorthak Empire needed the help of a lost human boy to survive. But something had changed in his thinking over the past days. The need for help no longer felt like weakness. It felt like practical cooperation. Then we find another way, Kale said. Together. Minho nodded, and they returned to their work. Above them, the planet shook with increasing violence, but below ground, two former enemies had become something new, allies united by necessity and mutual respect. The dragon was learning that survival sometimes required more than strength. Sometimes it required trust. The ground shook violently as another earthquake struck the planet. This one was stronger than the others, sending cracks spiderwebbing through the crystal walls around them. Minho's scanner showed alarming readings. The seismic activity was accelerating faster than predicted. We have to move now, Minho said, his voice tight with worry. This whole section will collapse soon. Working with desperate efficiency, they had managed to free Kyle from most of the crystal debris. His legs were mobile again, though painful, and one wing was completely free. But the other wing remained pinned under a massive crystal formation that blocked their path to the tunnel system beyond. "Can you break it?" Minho asked, studying the formation. Kale examined the crystal carefully. "Yes, but it will bring down everything above us. We would be buried instantly. Then we need another way." Minho pulled out his scanner and began examining the crystal from every angle he could reach. The device's small screen showed the internal structure of the formation, revealing stress points and weak areas that were invisible to the naked eye. "Here," he said, pointing to a spot near the base. "The crystal has a natural fracture line here. If we can create the right kind of pressure at exactly this point, it might split cleanly along this line instead of shattering." "How do we create the right pressure?" Minho thought for a moment, then began looking around the cave floor. He picked up several smaller crystal fragments and began arranging them in a careful pattern. "Leverage," he explained. "My friend Sora taught me about mechanical advantage. If we can use these smaller crystals as a fulcrum point and apply pressure in exactly the right way, together, they built a simple but effective lever system using crystal fragments and debris." Kale provided the raw strength while Minho calculated angles and pressure points. It was delicate work that required perfect timing and coordination. "On 3, Minho said, positioning himself at the control point of their makeshift lever. 1, 2, 3! Kyle applied his strength gradually and precisely. The massive crystal formation groaned under the pressure, stress building along the fracture line Minho had identified. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sharp crack, the formation split cleanly in two, creating a passage large enough for both of them to move through. "It worked," Minho said, grinning with relief and pride. But their celebration was cut short by another massive earthquake. This one was the strongest yet, and they could hear the sound of massive cave-ins echoing through the tunnel system around them. "Move!" Kyle shouted. They squeezed through the opening and found themselves in a narrow tunnel that sloped upward. Minho led the way with his light, while Kale followed, his larger form barely fitting through some of the passages. His damaged wing dragged painfully against the tunnel walls, but he pushed forward without complaint. The tunnel branched and split multiple times, creating a maze that would have been impossible for either of them to navigate alone. Minho's geological knowledge helped him read the rock formations and choose passages that led upward, while Kyle's enhanced senses could detect air currents that suggested connections to the surface. They had been climbing for nearly an hour when disaster struck. Minho stepped onto what looked like solid ground, but the rock gave way beneath his feet. He fell with a cry of surprise, disappearing into a hidden pit that dropped into darkness below. Kyle moved without thinking. He dove forward and caught Minho's wrist just as the boy was about to fall beyond reach. The sudden weight pulled painfully at Kale's injured wing, but he held on. "I have you," Kale said, straining to pull the boy back up to safety. But the edge of the pit was crumbling under their combined weight. More rocks fell away, and Kale realized that his own purchase on the tunnel floor was becoming unstable. In moments, they would both fall into the pit. Without hesitation, Minho reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tool. He began chipping away at the rock wall, creating handholds. "There," he said, finding a solid place to grip. "I can climb up if you can hold me steady." Working together, they managed to get Minho back onto solid ground. But the effort had cost them precious time, and the earthquakes were getting worse. The tunnel system was beginning to collapse around them. "This way," Kale said, pointing to a passage that showed signs of strong air movement. "The surface is close." They ran through increasingly unstable tunnels as the planet shook itself apart around them. Crystal formations fell like rain, and the sound of massive cave-ins echoed from every direction. More than once, they had to change direction when their chosen path became blocked by fallen debris. Finally, they reached a vertical shaft that led straight up toward daylight. The opening was perhaps 50 feet above them, reachable only by flight or a very difficult climb up the smooth crystal walls. "My wings are too damaged for flight," Kale said, testing the movement painfully, "and you cannot climb these walls." Minho examined the shaft carefully, then pulled out some equipment from his pack. Among his geological tools, he had climbing gear, rope, pitons, and a small hammer. "Sora made me promise to always carry safety equipment," he explained. "She said caves are dangerous even for experts." But as Minho began setting up the climbing gear, another massive earthquake struck. This one was so strong that it knocked both of them to the ground. Large chunks of crystal fell from above, and the shaft itself began to narrow as the walls shifted. "The opening is closing," Kale observed. "Soon it will be too narrow for escape." Minho looked at his climbing gear, then at Kale's damaged wings, then back at the narrowing shaft above. His face showed the rapid calculation of someone solving a complex problem under extreme pressure. "I have an idea," he said, "but you will have to trust me completely." "What do you need me to do?" Minho began fashioning a harness system using his climbing rope and some of his other equipment. The design was clever and practical, clearly influenced by engineering principles his friend Sora had taught him. "Your wings may be too damaged to fly normally," Minho explained as he worked, "but they can still provide lift and guidance. If I can create the right support system, we can combine your natural abilities with mechanical assistance." The harness system connected both of them together, with Minho's weight serving as a counterbalance to help stabilize Kale's flight. It was not a perfect solution, but it might work if they could reach the shaft opening before it closed completely. "This is insane," Kale said, but he was already helping Minho adjust the harness straps. "Yes," Minho agreed with a grin. "Sora always said the best engineering solutions look impossible until they work." Another earthquake struck just as they finished their preparations. The shaft opening was now barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, and it was still closing. "Now or never," Minho said. Kale spread his damaged wings and pushed off from the ground with all his remaining strength. The harness system worked exactly as Minho had predicted, distributing their combined weight in a way that allowed Kale's wings to provide just enough lift to carry them both upward. They rose through the narrowing shaft in a desperate race against the closing stone. Crystal walls scraped against Kale's wings and Minho's pack, but they kept rising. The circle of daylight above grew larger, closer, almost within reach. With a final burst of effort, they shot through the opening just as the shaft walls ground together behind them. They tumbled onto the surface of the planet, breathing hard and covered in crystal dust, but alive and free. The war above had ended. The battlefield was quiet except for the distant rumble of continuing earthquakes. But Kyle and Minho had won, a different kind of victory. They had escaped the impossible trap through cooperation, trust, and the combination of their different strengths. As they lay on the ground catching their breath, Kale realized that something fundamental had changed in his understanding of what strength really meant. The surface of Kepler 442b looked nothing like the battlefield Kale remembered. The orbital bombardment had stopped, and an eerie quiet had settled over the landscape. Smoke rose from destroyed buildings in the distance, but there were no sounds of weapons fire or marching armies. Kyle and Minho sat near the collapsed entrance to the crystal caves, both exhausted from their underground ordeal. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded Kale of home. But he was no longer certain where home truly was. "Your fleet is gone," Minho observed, pointing to the empty sky. "The fighting has stopped." Kale activated his emergency beacon, a backup system that had survived the electromagnetic pulse. The device searched for Vorthak's signals but found nothing. His forces had indeed departed, following standard military procedure when a commander was presumed dead. "They believe I died in the cave collapse," Kyle said. "Without confirmation of my death or survival, they retreat to avoid risking more ships. So you are stranded here?" "It appears so." Minho stood up and brushed dust from his clothes. Then we should go to the colony. You will need medical attention for your injuries, and I need to let people know I am alive. Kale stared at the boy in amazement. You want to take me to your people, the ones I have been trying to destroy? You are hurt, and you helped me escape the caves. That matters more than what happened before. Your people will want to kill me. I am their enemy. Minho shrugged. Maybe. But my sister is a doctor. She took an oath to help anyone who needs healing, and Governor Lee is a practical man. He will want to understand why the famous Kale Vorthok is traveling with a geology student instead of leading an attack. The logic was simple, but it challenged everything Kale understood about how wars worked. Enemies captured each other, imprisoned each other, or killed each other. They did not provide medical care and ask for explanations. But Kale's biomechanical systems were still damaged, his wing was badly injured, and he had no way to contact his own people. He needed help, and the only help available came from the humans he had been trying to conquer. I will come with you, he decided, but I will not surrender my weapons. I would not expect you to, Minho replied. Trust has to start somewhere, but it does not have to start with helplessness. They walked together across the battle-scarred landscape toward the human colony. The journey took several hours, and they used the time to continue their conversations about culture and philosophy. Kale found himself genuinely curious about human ways of thinking, while Minho seemed fascinated by Vorthok perspectives on strength and honor. My grandfather once told me something interesting, Minho said as they climbed a rocky hill. He said that every person carries their own culture inside them, but they also have the power to change that culture through their choices. Vorthak do not change, Kale said automatically. We are what we are born to be. But you have already changed. The Kale Vorthak who fell into the trap would never have shared water with a human enemy. The Kale Vorthak from the stories would have tried to take my supplies by force. This observation troubled Kale because it was true. His behavior over the past few days had not matched the Vorthak ideal of how a warrior should act. He had cooperated instead of dominating, shared instead of taking, trusted instead of remaining suspicious. Perhaps the caves changed both of us, he said finally. When they reached the outskirts of New Busan, they were met by a patrol of human soldiers. The soldiers' weapons came up immediately when they recognized Kale, but Minho stepped between them. Please, he said, I know who this is, but he helped me escape from the caves. I need to speak with Governor Lee immediately. The soldiers were clearly confused by the situation. Their enemy's most feared commander, walking peacefully alongside a missing civilian, asking for a meeting instead of demanding surrender. It was not a scenario covered in any military manual. After some radio communication with their superiors, the soldiers agreed to escort both of them to the colony's command center. But they kept their weapons ready and maintained a safe distance from Kale. News of their arrival spread quickly through the colony. People came out of damaged buildings to stare at the massive dragon walking through their streets. Some looked afraid, others curious, a few openly hostile. But no one attacked, and no one ran away screaming. They are braver than I expected, Kale commented. They have been through a war, Minho replied. Surviving makes people either more fearful or more confident. These people chose confidence. At the command center, they were met by Governor Lee Dae-ho, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and the bearing of someone who had carried heavy responsibilities through difficult times. Behind him stood a woman in medical clothing and another woman wearing an engineer's uniform. Minho, the doctor exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace the boy. We thought you were dead. The caves collapsed days ago. I am fine, Yoonji, Minho assured his sister. This is Kale Vorthak. He helped me escape. The engineer, who Kale assumed was So-Ra, stared at him with open fascination. The biomechanical integration is remarkable, she said. I have never seen anything like it. Governor Lee raised a hand for silence. Explain to me, Mr. Park, why you are traveling with our enemy instead of hiding from him. Minho told the story of their underground adventure, describing how they had worked together to survive and escape. He spoke of Kale's willingness to share resources and cooperate despite their opposing sides in the war. "Interesting," Governor Lee said when the story was finished. "And what do you want from us, Commander Vorthak?" "Medical attention for my injuries," Kale replied honestly, "and time to contact my fleet so they can retrieve me." "Your fleet is gone," the governor pointed out. "Our long-range scanners show no Vorthak ships within several light years. They will not return quickly. Then I request temporary sanctuary until I can arrange other transportation." The request created a stir among the humans present. Several military officers began speaking at once, expressing concerns about harboring such a dangerous enemy. But Governor Lee raised his hand again for quiet. "You could have killed Minho in the caves and taken his supplies," the governor observed. "You could have used him as a hostage when you reached the surface. You could have demanded our surrender as the price for his life. Why did you do none of these things?" Kyle considered the question carefully. The truthful answer would reveal how much his thinking had changed during his time underground, but dishonesty would serve no purpose here. "Because those actions would not have been honorable," he said finally. "Minho earned my respect through his courage and intelligence. To betray that respect would diminish my own honor." Dr. Choyonji stepped forward. "I took an oath to heal anyone who needs healing," she said firmly. "Politics and war do not change medical ethics. I will treat his injuries." Engineer Kim So-ra nodded in agreement. "And I would like to study his biomechanical systems if he permits. The technology is fascinating." Governor Lee studied Kale for a long moment, then made his decision. "You may stay until suitable transportation can be arranged, but you will be confined to the medical facility and monitored at all times." "That is acceptable," Kale agreed. As they prepared to leave for the medical center, Minho touched Kale's arm gently. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. Thank you as well, Minho of the humans. You have taught me things I did not know I needed to learn." Walking through the human colony under guard, receiving medical care from his former enemies, Kale realized that his understanding of strength, honor, and warfare had been fundamentally altered. The dragon who had fallen into the trap was not the same being who had emerged from the caves, and he was beginning to think that might be a good thing. 2 weeks had passed since Kale's arrival at the human medical facility. Dr. Choi Yoon-ji had worked tirelessly to repair his injuries, while engineer Kim So-ra had successfully restored most of his biomechanical systems. The humans had treated him not as a prisoner, but as a patient and guest. During his recovery, Kale had time to observe human society more closely than ever before. He watched families caring for their wounded, neighbors sharing food with those who had lost their homes, and children playing in the ruins with laughter that defied the destruction around them. Everything he saw challenged his understanding of what made a species strong. "Your people rebuild quickly," he commented to Minho, who visited him daily at the medical center. "We have practice," Minho replied with a sad smile. "This is not the first time New Busan has been attacked, but each time we rebuild. We try to make things better than before. In Vorthak culture, we conquer new worlds when old ones are damaged. We do not repair what is broken." "That must be very expensive," Minho observed. "Always needing new planets, new resources, new people to control." The comment was made innocently, but it struck Kale with unexpected force. The Vorthak Empire was expensive to maintain. It required constant expansion to feed its need for resources and labor. The empire had to keep conquering or it would collapse under its own weight. "You think differently about these things," Kyle said. "My grandfather used to say that the strongest structures are not the ones that never break, but the ones that can be repaired when they do break." On his 15th day in the medical facility, Kale received an unexpected visitor. Governor Lee Dae-ho entered his room carrying a communication device and wearing an expression of serious concern. "Commander Vorthak," the governor said, "I have received a message intended for you. It is from your second-in-command." Kale took the device and activated the message. The face of Drock appeared on the small screen, his expression cold and formal. "Kale, Vorthak," the message began. "Intelligence reports indicate you have been captured by the humans of Kepler 442b. The High Command has declared you compromised and stripped of your rank and authority. You are no longer considered a member of the Vorthak Empire. This message serves as official notification of your exile." The message ended abruptly. Kale stared at the blank screen, processing what he had just heard. In the space of a few seconds, his entire identity had been erased. He was no longer a Vorthak commander, no longer a warrior of the Empire, no longer welcome among his own people. I'm sorry," Governor Lee said quietly. "This must be difficult news." Kale set down the communication device and considered his situation. He was now a being without a home, without a people, without a purpose. According to Vorthak law, he no longer existed, but strangely he did not feel the devastation he would have expected. Instead, he felt something like relief. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "this is an opportunity rather than a punishment." "What do you mean?" Kale stood and walked to the window, looking out at the human colony where people were working together to repair damage and improve their community. Children played safely while adults labored to build a better future. It was not the Vorthak way, but it was effective in ways that Vorthak culture never acknowledged. "I have learned things during my time here," Kale said. "Things that would be considered heretical by my former empire. I have seen cooperation create better results than domination. I have seen mercy prove stronger than conquest. I have seen hope accomplish what fear could not." Governor Lee joined him at the window. "And what will you do with this knowledge?" "I would like to request permanent asylum," Kale said. "And I would like to offer my services to help defend this colony against future Vorthak attacks." The governor raised an eyebrow. "You would fight against your own people?" "They are no longer my people, and they will return eventually. When they do, you will need someone who understands their tactics and technology." Over the following days, Kale's request was debated extensively by the Colonial Council. Some citizens were strongly opposed to harboring such a dangerous former enemy. Others argued that his knowledge would be invaluable for defense. The decision was not easy. It was Min-ho who ultimately provided the strongest argument in Kale's favor. "This person risked his life to help me escape the caves," Min-ho told the council. "He could have taken my supplies and left me to die, but he chose cooperation instead. He could have used me as a hostage when we reached the surface, but he chose trust instead. I believe people can change, and I believe Kyle Vorthak has changed." Dr. Yoon-ji and engineer So-ra also spoke in support, describing Kyle's respectful behavior during his medical treatment and his genuine interest in learning. About human technology and culture, Governor Lee cast the deciding vote. "Asylum granted," he announced, "but with conditions. You will be monitored for the first year. You will undergo regular psychological evaluations, and you will work with our military advisors to help prepare our defenses." "I accept these conditions," Kale replied. 6 months later, when the Vorthak fleet returned for another attack on New Busan, they found the human colony transformed. New defensive systems, designed with Kale's knowledge of Vorthak technology, turned away the invasion with minimal casualties. The sight of Kale Vorthak standing alongside human defenders sent shockwaves through the Vorthak fleet. Their former greatest commander had not just been captured or killed, he had voluntarily joined their enemies. The message was clear to both sides. If even the most feared Vorthak warrior could find a different path, then change was possible for anyone. Years passed. Kyle became an integral part of New Busan's defense force, but more importantly, he became part of the community. He learned to tend gardens alongside Min-ho, studied human engineering with So-ra, and assisted Dr. Yunji in developing new medical techniques that could help both humans and other species. The galaxy watched in amazement as stories spread of the dragon who had learned to plant seeds instead of sowing destruction. Other Vorthak warriors began to question their empire's methods. Some even sought asylum on worlds that had heard Kale's story. The transformation was slow but undeniable. The idea that strength could come from building rather than destroying, from cooperation rather than domination, began to take root in star systems across the galaxy. One evening, as twin suns set over the thriving colony of New Busan, Kale and Minho worked together in the community garden. The former terror of the galaxy carefully tended tomato plants, while the young geologist explained soil composition and nutrient cycles. "Do you ever regret your choice?" Minho asked. Kale considered the question as he watched human children playing, safely nearby, their laughter carried on the evening breeze. "No," he said. "I have learned that true strength is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to protect and nurture what is valuable." "My grandfather would have liked you," Minho said with a smile. "I think I would have liked him as well." As darkness fell, lights came on throughout the colony, illuminating workshops where humans and refugee aliens worked together, medical centers where all species received equal care, and schools where children learned that former enemies could become trusted friends. The dragon had indeed fallen into a trap. But his rescuer had been exactly the right person after all, someone who understood that the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from the courage to change. And across the galaxy, other dragons began to dream of learning how to fly in new directions.